Welcome, everyone. Uh, yeah, we're very excited about today and delighted to have all of you here in person or online to celebrate the 30th anniversary of LOINC. What an amazing accomplishment. I'm Marjorie Rollins. I'm the Executive Director for Health Data Standards. I'll be your MC for today. It's a privilege to do that. Um, excuse me, I am honored to be able to lead a team of incredibly talented people that steward LOINC. And I'm also honored to be a part of the LOINC community and witness and share in all of the accomplishments along the way and in reaching this tremendous milestone of 30 years of working together to improve health data standards and better care and better health. LOINC, as we all know, is a terminology, but what we must acknowledge and recognize is that LOINC, the essence of LOINC, is that it is a community of thought leaders like Clem McDonald and Stan Huff and Dan Vreeman, a community of pioneers like Ed Hammond, Jim Semino, and Chris Shute, a community of champions like Betsy Humphreys, Craig Brader, Bill Tierney, Mickey Tripathi, Chuck Jaffe, and Charlie Harp, and a community of adopters and implementers like Susan Matney, Burke Mamlin, Corey Smith, Mark Roche, Steve Emmerich, Victor Lee, and countless other stakeholders and supporters, some of whom are joining us today, but all of whom we know celebrate along with us. We have a very exciting program planned for you. It's intended to be celebratory, reflective, and reminiscent, and also forward-thinking and insightful um, as we look to what's next. Dr. Rachel Patzer is here, Regenstrief CEO. Dr. Patzer is going to kick us off with some opening remarks, and then I'll be back with the rest of the program. So, Dr. Patzer.
Hello, everyone. Great. Thank you so much, Marjorie, for kicking us off. It's great to be here today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of LOINC. So it's clear that the widespread implementation and adoption have made LOINC a really key component of interoperable health IT solutions, not only in the US and worldwide, and it's just incredibly impressive to see the impact. It's used in nearly every country, mandated for use in nearly 30 countries, and available in 20 translations. So really, I think, emphasizes the impact and aligns so much with what we at Regenstrief really prioritize in our impact. And LOINC's origin can be traced back to the pioneering work by Regenstrief Institute investigators and led during its early years by principal founder, Dr. Clem McDonald, who I see has arrived. Welcome, Clem. And the innovative work related to LOINC communities today in Regenstrief's Health Data Standards Unit is really supported by an incredible community. So 5 active communities, annual conference, which I had the pleasure to attend this fall, was amazing to meet many of you at that conference and learn a lot more about just the incredible impact of LOINC. Perfect. And the releases every twice a year, releases up 2 releases and issued annually is just reflects, I think, our incredible understanding of the importance of LOINC and healthcare trends, collaboration, and delivers our commitment to support information exchange and interoperability. And Regenstrief Institute is really proud to be the home of this giant in terminology standards and incredibly supportive of the generous funders to make LOINC available to all users, which is, again, I think, really aligned with our mission at Regenstrief, and accommodating information sharing on such a large scale that I don't think was even hinted at when LOINC was founded. The standard is in use on computers, tablets, wearables, smartphones, and really facilitates access and plays an essential role in providing better patient care. And that's the impact I think we continue to see today. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has acknowledged and recommended LOINC in federal regulations and initiatives. And our key funders are just so important to this mission and supporting that, providing long-term support for this vital standard. And I think we have a lot of thanks for the NIH National Library of Medicine, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, and also the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So Regenstrief collaborates with other major players in healthcare data space to really broaden LOINC's collaboration, which I think is really amazing to see. And I think we have a lot of plans over the coming years, our new strategic plan in Regenstrief to really advance this and continue some of this collaboration and advance and broaden LOINC dissemination and adoption. And so I think great examples of this are the long-term agreement with SNOMED International. And then another great example that I'm really excited about in December of 2023, so just a few months ago, the Regenstrief Foundation generously provided an over $4 million grant to support Regenstrief's health data standards experts to co-lead with HL7 International's Gravity project as well, a really global initiative to categorize and standardize social determinants of health data standards into electronic medical records, global, standardize some of these social determinants of health elements. And I think this is really well aligned with our mission at Regenstrief as well. So that's a really ambitious project that really seeks to integrate social needs data into clinical care to more effectively address health inequities. So really excited to see that work come to fruition in the next 4 years as well. So again, really thank all of you for being here today. This is incredible to see this community come together for this 30-year anniversary. Thanks to Marjorie's leadership of the LOINC team, all of the team members that play such an incredible role, and really all of you. So thank you, and looking forward to having future conversations with all of you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for those very inspiring, thoughtful comments. We have a video that we want to share with you.
LOINC is literally, when you spell it out, logical observation, identifiers, names, and codes. And it's a database of codes and meanings for observations across a very large spectrum.
Things that you can see and measure and evaluate in the real world to try and make sharing of data easier and more interoperable. If you write a rule and say if the patient's hematocrit is something or the patient's glucose is something, you need some standardized way of representing that. And so without LOINC, or at least the terminology, we can't share data.
LOINC standardizes clinical information because health systems, healthcare organizations all use their own language, which is not ideal. LOINC serves as the standard to make those things mean the same thing when they mean the same thing. And you have to have a standard to do that, particularly when you exchange patient data. And that's important to patient care and to provide better care overall.
It's very satisfying and gratifying that this stuff that we started out with a bunch of geeks some 30 years ago, and then the next thing that happened was, it spread and got used in many parts of the world.
It's good just at sort of an organizational level to think that something that you're doing has found utility in many places, but actually personally to me, it's so fun because of the new people I get to meet and the fun places we get to go. I love the international participation, the energy that the people from those other countries bring to the activity, and they've contributed a bunch in their own way by translating LOINC into other languages.
It's very satisfying and gratifying. If something has lasted 30 years, that's not bad. It's a sign of success. I don't think we expected it to be this good, but we intended for it to be good.
At the time that LOINC began, Clem was at Regenstrief. And because we wanted LOINC to be available to everyone, we weren't looking to make a commercial venture out of this. Clem approached Regenstrief and asked for their support, and I know that over the years they've given a lot of financial support and organizational support.
Sam Regenstrief, who funded the foundation, he likes stuff that was used a lot, but his family said he would love to know that it's all over the world now. I feel like he'd done something practical. He always wanted practical, useful things to be created.
I think there's two things on the horizon. I see much more collaboration between LOINC and other entities or standards. We're doing a lot of work with SNOMED International now, and I think that serves as a model for what we'll do for the future. I also think we will provide more thought leadership to the standards community. I think that is a little known fact about what the LOINC community provides to the standards community and to healthcare.
I'm tremendously excited about the SNOMED collaboration and making the LOINC ontology computable and integrated with SNOMED in the sense that you can reason consistently across the LOINC content and the SNOMED content. I think there are opportunities to apply new kinds of automation, machine learning, AI techniques that will probably speed up the work that we're doing. The other thing that would help a bunch is if we had rapid access to real patient data so that we could know how LOINC was being used in the real world and whether it was consistent or things that we needed to improve or change. It would just be wonderful to be able to look at 1 million patient records and say, what did they actually say in those records, and what are all of the characteristics and attributes and value sets that are associated with that data, and do it against real data instead of me guessing what's important.
I had never been good at thinking about next year, but I think it'll be used more widely, and it probably increased its scope to cover additional things that are emerging.
I want to just say how grateful we are to Clem McDonald and to Stan Huff for their vision, their pioneering spirit that brought LOINC to fruition. I don't think healthcare would be where it is if those two hadn't done what they did. How about that? We hope you enjoyed the video. Okay. We hope you enjoyed the video. It really does highlight LOINC's journey and reflects all of the dedication, creativity, curiosity, and investment of hard work that brought us to where we are today. Many thanks to Clem McDonald, Stan Huff, and the Regenstrief PR team, and our Health Data Standards team for making that video possible. This is the perfect segue into the next part of our program. Our program today is intended to be conversational with dialogue amongst all of us. And to help with that, we've scheduled two amazing panels. First, we're going to hear from an esteemed panel of LOINC founders and early supporters and contributors who are going to reminisce a bit and share their thoughts on the journey that brought us to this 30th mile marker. They'll also share their thoughts on where we should go next. And you should know that the paths of this first group of panelists have crossed many times over throughout the years. And I'm sure we'll have a feeling of old home week. I'll introduce them shortly. Then we have another panel of adopters and contributors and implementers of LOINC who are going to enlighten us on how LOINC has impacted their work and helped them solve a challenge. They will also share their thoughts on what should be on the horizon for LOINC. After we hear from each panel, we're going to have conversation and dialogue between the two panels and amongst all of us in the room and those joining virtually. And that discussion will be facilitated by Virginia Rio, a seasoned health policy veteran and facilitator. So now I'm pleased to introduce the first panel. Dr. Clem McDonald is the founder of LOINC, and he is a true trailblazer and visionary. He pioneered the first work in what would become the Regenstrief Center for Biomedical Informatics, which holds Dr. McDonald's name. Clem, as we fondly call him, is a constant contributor to LOINC, and I cannot emphasize that enough. And he is currently the Chief Health Data Standards Officer at the National Library of Medicine. Dr. Stan Huff is a LOINC co-founder. He is a committed contributor to LOINC and currently is co-chair of the LOINC Clinical Committee, and he is a trusted advisor to the Health Data Standards team at Regenstrief. Stan is also the Chief Medical Informatics Officer at Graphite Health and has held 2 terms as Chairman of the Board of Directors of HL7. Dr. Jim Case is unwavering in his commitment to LOINC, and Dr. Case is also a trusted advisor, and he served on the LOINC committee for many years. Jim, as we call him, is currently the chief terminologist at SNOMED International. Dr. Ed Hammond, who is joining us virtually, is an informatics thought leader and visionary. He too is an enduring supporter and advocate for LOINC. Ed is currently the director of the Duke Center for Health Informatics. Betsy Humphreys is a steadfast LOINC champion, a visionary, and a beacon in health data standards. We are grateful for Ms. Humphreys' confidence and trust in LOINC and for advocating for funding for LOINC and for Regenstrief. Ms. Humphreys is retired from the National Library of Medicine as its deputy director. And we truly appreciate that she is here physically with us, which demonstrates her unwavering commitment to LOINC. And finally, one of the strongest advocates for LOINC that walks this earth is Dr. Dan Vreeman, who spent 13 years at Regenstrief, including serving as the LOINC director and its primary ambassador. Dan, who is currently the Chief Standards Development Officer at HL7, can't join us today, but he has shared a video message, which we will play during this segment. Beginning with Clem, we invite each of the panelists to join us here up front and reflect on the journey and experiences that contributed to the widespread adoption of LOINC and brought us to where we are today. So after your remarks, which should be 3 to 5 minutes, please have a seat up front or remain up front. So Clem, we'll call you first. Want to come here?
I have no prepared remarks. This has been a fun run. We had a little pig that went like I would bring maybe 20 of them to a meeting and I'd throw them out. It'd create a riot. Everybody grabs one of them. So this has been a fun run, and it takes a village. I think the village is mostly here to accomplish this. And I want to especially thank Betsy, who had the belief in these kinds of things when no one else did. So thank you, Betsy. I don't have much more to say, or should I? Should I have more to
You can
say?
say whatever you want.
I can
Well,
say.
we can pass it on to, I think Stan is next.
Why don't we pass it on?
Well, I just have to say that it's just a wonderful thing to be here. My main thing I hope you would remember from what I say is just wonderful gratitude for everyone, and especially for Clem. You know, back when things started, we had HL7 and people were starting to use HL7. So that gave you a structure for a message, but then everybody was using their own individual unique codes for things. And Clem said, that's not interoperability. We need to give them proper names. We need to, you know, create standard codes. And he had that insight. And one of the many things that he taught me was if you want to do things with standards, or really probably with any organization, don't go just bring an idea and talk about things. Bring a draft document or bring some content and have people review that and, you know, do something, move it. So I learned so many things from Clem, and I mean, no one should be mistaken. Clem is the founder of LOINC. It's a privilege and an honor to be called a co-chair, but I'm a subscript. I'm a footnote compared to Clem. Clem is the shining light. A funny quote that I just heard. I'd never heard this, and attributed to Confucius, which is, giving things their proper name is the beginning of wisdom. And that seems so appropriate for what we're doing, is trying to give things their proper names so that we can begin to reason and use that information. Just some other people that so many of us that have been involved. But I remember some people specifically, especially from Europe, that contributed. We built things based on ideas that Henrik Olsen, who published the Silver Book, gave us, and Tom Fears and George Demore and others that really contributed to the foundational thinking that we had about how to do this and how to approach it. And so grateful to know those people. And then so many of you, I won't start naming people because I won't name everyone, and it's, but just know that I love this. There's nothing, I think, an inborn genetic defect to puzzle over how we create meaning with words and how we can then make that computable. And I think it's at the heart of what we have to do to improve the quality of medicine in the US, is to really use those terminologies to establish interoperability in a way that we can share knowledge as executable programs. So thank you. So grateful to be here, and brings back so many memories to be here in Indianapolis. Maybe we should take a tour over to the 5th floor in the old building to to really get in the spirit, but so wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jim Case.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say how honored I am as a simple country veterinarian to be included in such an esteemed group of individuals. I remember vividly the very first time that I was introduced to LOINC and to Clem was at a workshop at AMIA in 1997. And I remember walking up to Clem and asking him if he would be interested if veterinary medical terms would be included in LOINC. And I found out soon after that I'd been drafted to be on the LOINC committee. It was an exciting time back then to have an opportunity to work in an area that was dedicated towards standardizing something that was so critical in the work that I was doing as a member of a veterinary diagnostic laboratory community. And the very first work that we did is we encoded the entire World Animal Health Organization epizootic disease manual in LOINC and submitted that as part of one of the early releases. And I remember Clem chuckling over some of the interesting terms that we have in veterinary medicine, like blue tongue disease or greasy pig disease. And it was a whole new adventure. And the collaborative work that we had back then was really the foundation of a larger program that we started in the veterinary community in 2002 called the National Animal Health Laboratory Network. And LOINC terminology played a critical role in our ability to do animal disease surveillance across the US. And it continues now. We continue to add new terminology. The network is thriving, and LOINC is really an essential part of that. And I think looking towards the future, it was mentioned already, is the collaboration between LOINC and SNOMED. To SNOMED, speaking with my SNOMED hat on now, to SNOMED, we're looking at this as kind of the prototype for the way that standards organizations collaborate together. It's been an extremely positive relationship between the two organizations. We have generated a considerable amount of excitement out in the community in being able to distribute LOINC content in various formats, regardless of whether people want to adopt the standard LOINC format or want to use the SNOMED format. And we like to emphasize that it's not really the format in which the content is distributed, it's the content that's being developed. And the fact that we can achieve pretty much universal representation in a standardized way for observations is really a key benefit. And we're looking forward to continuing the development of this collaboration and looking at this as a way for both the LOINC community and the SNOMED community to collaborate very closely with other standards organizations in order to achieve what we all want as the holy grail of healthcare interoperability, data interoperability. It has been a real pleasure to work with the LOINC community for as many years as I did, and now I get to kind of come back to working with LOINC again in the LOINC collaboration as part of the SNOMED and LOINC agreement. So I look forward to great things happening in the future with this. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ed Hammond, and I'm going to go back before LOINC.
Okay.
And my group at Duke created one of the first electronic health records starting in 1969. And we recognized that lab data was something that was critical. And so we created a program that would interface us with a laboratory system. But I never thought about standards. And Clem was the person who put that idea in my mind. Interestingly enough, because standards has really become my professional life. I really would like to express my appreciation for Clem and Stan and the role, and Jim and others, the role they've played in my own life. But Clem was one of the first people that introduced the concept of standards to me. And I would tell you that creating standard was not a popular activity in SCAMSI and AMIA. It was considered to be non-academic work. It turns out it's the most important thing that I think anybody's ever done to that period of time. But Clem put together a panel that we presented at SCAMSI. And I think I couldn't remember all the participants, but Clem, was a participant, Octo Barnett was a participant, Elma Gabriele, and maybe a couple of other people. Was the first time we talked about standards at an academic meeting. Then Stan decided he would really try to make an official standard out of that, and he got involved with ASTM, one of the largest standard making organizations, and focusing entirely on lab data. Clem was obsessed, and he says he didn't know where it was going to, but I think Clem always had the vision that creating the ability of moving lab data with known labels was still not LOINC. And then when Don Simborg decided that they would like a different kind of standards that deal with everything besides lab data, Clem said, nope, it's got to be lab data. And so the first meeting of what became HL7, Clem stayed away. Now, I think he regrets that a little bit now because I always make sure he has to be a year behind me in terms of how long we've been part of HL7. But Clem joined us quickly, thank goodness. And he joined, became the co-chair of the laboratory work group. Again, the same persistent energy in trying to be able to get the lab vendors to use codes to move stuff back. So when lab started, but Clem has played a major role, and one of the other roles he played was at Tyson's Corner when HL7 had one of its early meetings, and it was the National Football League was on strike, and all those football players there. So you got into the elevator surrounded by huge behemoth people. A bit nervous somewhat. Clem and I were the only two people that argued to have position defined with delimiters because we recognize the cost of transmitting lots of text data. And we fortunately won out. And the early versions of HL7 version 2 was position defined with delimiters. The other group wanted to have a model-based system, and that became version 3 later, and we understand the complexity of that. But I really would like to also reflect on the relationship between LOINC and HL7. A number of people have been involved. Stan, as he's indicated, served as chair twice. I think, Stan, other than me, the only person that's had multiple terms. We have Dan Freeman now. That really is the key player now in HL7. Marjorie is engaged with HL7. And in many ways, I think HL7 and LOINC have really been wedded in such a way. I think it's delightful that LOINC is the most widely used system in the world. And so my closing remarks is Rockies may tumble, Gibraltar may crumble, but LOINC is here forever. Thanks, you both.
Thank you very much for that, Ed. Up next is Betsy Humphries.
In 1994, which I guess was the year LOINC was born, right? Because it's 30 years, there were few electronic health records and no designated US clinical data standards. You all know this. The existing, at the time, potentially useful clinical terminologies and code sets lacked some or all of the following: good structure, precise semantics, regular maintenance and updates, effective distribution mechanisms, reasonable cost and licensing terms, and especially more than just a handful of users. So this was all missing. So despite this discouraging reality, the U.S. National Library of Medicine, like many others, and all of you, viewed clinical terminology standards as essential to achieve, in our case, effective connections between patients' electronic health records and relevant clinical decision support, and production of useful research and public health data as a byproduct of patient care. To these ends, NLM worked, again with many others, including those in the room, to establish some key missing pieces. Of course, LOINC was a missing piece in the standards area, but I'm ratcheting this up a higher level in terms of missing pieces necessary for achieving standardization, standardized terminology in US electronic health records. These missing pieces included some mechanism for selecting standards that could be required for all segments of the healthcare and public health enterprise in the United States, a non-overlapping set of target US standards selected by whatever mechanism we would establish, federal financial support for ongoing maintenance, enhancement, and free dissemination of the selected standards, and sufficient clinical users and uses to drive improvements in the standards before standards were mandated for use. As we've heard, LOINC and SNOMED are making wonderful progress on the margins of the non-overlapping issue. And you can argue about whether sufficient use predated mandates for use. But in the main, these prerequisites were achieved. It only took a couple of decades, an army of heroes and champions, and at least 2 federal laws to do it. LOINC played a critical role in many ways, including being the, quote, easy first example of federal support for ongoing maintenance and free dissemination of standards. Today, as you know, we've got tons of electronic health records. We've got massive use of LOINC and other particularly LOINC, but other clinical terminology standards as well. We actually have patient records that can be linked to clinical decision support. And we have useful clinical research, health services research, and public health data generated as a byproduct of patient care. The last 2, of course, are not push-button operations at all, but they exist and at a non-trivial level. LOINC is a key player in all of this, and will wonders never cease also in actual use of health data standards in clinical trials data. So I think that we've come an extremely long way. If you look at nothing really of all of this infrastructure existing 30 years ago and where we are today. I'm going to defer to everybody who's working with LOINC today to whatever they say about what is needed in the future. But for what it's worth, I hope that everyone cleans up the ragged edges on links between standards and clinical decision support tools. And I hope that also in the area of really moving forward to a better approach to generating research data from clinical care and also using these health data standards in clinical research. I think, as we've heard already, I think increased reliance on AI in maintenance and use of LOINC seems like a no-brainer. And since it's me talking, please don't forget that the price of preventing more duplicate creation and maintenance of clinical vocabularies and code sets is eternal vigilance. And there is currently a golden opportunity to avoid creating a clinical modification of ICD-11. Please do this. Seize this opportunity. And likewise, in my opinion, there's an imperative to work out a rational and efficient collaboration between SNOMED CT and the foundation of ICD-11. So I'm relieved and happy that the present and future is in your hands.
Thank you very much for those very sage words, Betsy. As I mentioned before, Dan Freeman could not be here today. Again, I think he's one of the strongest advocates for LOINC that walks the earth, and that's not an exaggeration. So we're going to listen to his video.
Hello, everyone. What a wonderful privilege to be here celebrating LOINC's 30-year anniversary. I'm Dan Freeman, a true LOINCer at heart. I'm really disappointed that I'm not able to join you in person, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to share a few reflections with you in this video. I currently serve as Chief Standards Development Officer at HL7 International. Throughout its history, LOINC and HL7 have continuously co-evolved to meet the ever-emerging needs for health data interoperability. It's been a remarkable collaboration. I like to say that LOINC and HL7 standards such as FHIR go together like chips and salsa. FHIR is the perfect delivery vehicle for delicious, easy-to-consume data that's coded with LOINC. But I would not be here sharing this message with you today had I not been fortunate enough to arrive at the Regenstrief Institute as an informatics fellow back in 2003. This was a great fortune for many reasons. Chief among them was that the fellowship director at the time was Clem McDonald, who became my career-long mentor and friend. Early on, Clem showed me that computers are powerful digital change agents, but they are always limited in their ability to help clinicians by the scope of the data that's available to them in a format that they can make sense of. Clem was an early pioneer in building bridges across these islands of data by developing and using data exchange standards, including LOINC and back then HL7 version 2. And so as a fellow working with him, I led the efforts to enhance LOINC's model for representing radiology procedures and worked on developing techniques for automating mapping local test codes to LOINC codes. These early experiences got me hooked on the belief that open standards could unlock the potential for information systems and applications to improve health decision-making and care. That belief, shared with all of you who have contributed to LOINC over the years, continues to enable new digital freedoms around the world today. When I finished my fellowship in 2005, Clem recruited me to join the faculty of the Regenstrief Institute in Indiana University to continue developing and using data standards. And in 2006, when Clem left Regenstrief to join the U.S. National Library of Medicine, I became the director of LOINC at Regenstrief, a role that I held until 2019. In my time as a director, it was a joy to see LOINC experience tremendous growth in adoption and new content. We were developing LOINC as an open standard and propelled by continuous contributions from a growing global user community. That momentum has continued through this moment today, where there are users in nearly every corner of the planet, and LOINC has become an official national standard in many countries. This global success was aided by the contributions of many and novel methods, such as the one that we developed to enable translations, which resulted in 18 variants from 12 different languages. Over that time, the content in LOINC grew vigorously too. We were adding new terms to support the latest innovations in established domains like laboratory tests and clinical measurements, and developed new content models to support exchange of things like patient-reported outcomes, clinical document types, genetic testing results, and more. And you can now see the tremendous digital transformations that LOINC-coded data enables all around you. In fact, it's probably sitting right in your pocket. Still, this journey was never only about creating terms. It was really about connecting people and data and systems, breaking down barriers to understanding, and enhancing health on a global scale. LOINC's success is a collective one. It's propelled by a mindset of continuous learning. One of the things that I'm most proud of about LOINC is the set of principles we established about the shared beliefs and ideals we held about how we would do this work. If you haven't yet already, I'd encourage you to visit loinc.org/principles to learn more. And while our mission is serious, it doesn't mean that we have to take ourselves overly seriously. Anyway, it's a little hard when your name sounds like OINC and your mascot is a pink pig, but from Easter egg terms to the brand voice and committee meetings that juxtapose hotly debated issues with camaraderie and shared purpose, LOINC has always embraced the human aspect of doing informatics. It's not a coincidence that in celebrations like this and in the awards and recognitions we've established, that we highlight how the success comes from people who are willing to contribute their unique gifts and insights for the benefit of many. There are innumerable people to acknowledge and thank. It's impossible to do so in such a short time, but I did also want to give special mention to Stan Huff, who co-founded and co-led this movement from the beginning. I'd also like to acknowledge the longstanding support of the Regenstrief Institute, the Regenstrief Foundation, the U.S. National Library of Medicine, the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT, and all of the other funders who have contributed resources into sustaining LOINC as a global good. And thanks to each of you for being part of this remarkable story. The journey ahead is as exciting as the path we've traveled. Here's to another 30 years of learning and sharing to improve health around the world. Happy LOINCing.
That was great. Everyone hear me? All I can say is, wow, what an amazing brain trust we have assembled here. All of you have left us with an incredible history and legacy and sense of path forward. So thank you. Now we're going to continue our program and hear from the next set of panelists. I'm going to introduce them as a group. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. James Cimino, who is joining us virtually, and who is the Distinguished Professor and Chair of Biomedical Informatics and Data Science in the Hersink School of Medicine at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Dr. Cimino, of course, is author of the foundational and groundbreaking paper, The Desiderata for Controlled Medical Vocabularies. As we all know, it is a required reading for anyone that is associated in any way with medical vocabularies. Also joining us are our very own Dr. Burke Mamlin, who is an Associate Professor of Clinical Medicine in the IU School of Medicine and Program Director for the Regenstrief Clinical Informatics Fellowship. He is the Open MRS co-founder in the Regenstrief Center for Global Health Informatics. Dr. Mark Roche is here. He is the Executive Director for health informatics at Centropy. Dr. Roche is going to share his experience of using LOINC on a large scale for public health. Corey Smith is the Vice President of Informatics and Digital Products at the American Medical Association. He leads the technical work stream for the HL7 Gravity Project. We're very much looking forward to hearing from Corey about his work and his experience with LOINC. We're also looking forward to hearing from our colleagues at Clinical Architecture. Together, they bring strategic and clinical perspectives with using LOINC and terminologies. Steve Emmerich is the Vice President of Strategic Client Success, and Dr. Victor Lee is the Vice President for Clinical Informatics. And we're looking forward to hearing from Dr. Susan Matney, who is the past co-chair of the LOINC Nursing Committee and who has done a tremendous amount of work with LOINC. She is on faculty at the University of Utah, where she teaches informatics to nursing students. We're excited to have Dr. Matney here with us and hear her experience. Up first is Dr. James Cimino. Each speaker will take 3 to 5 minutes to present their comments. And Dr. James Cimino is up first.
Sorry, I'm a little shaky with Teams. Could I ask to go second? Because I realized I needed to make a change to my slides, and I'm almost done, but I'm not quite done. So could we?
Sure.
Yeah,
We'll just-
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
We'll just go on to Burke, right? Yeah, Burke, are you here?
Get rid of that. So the biggest thing I was worried about was having to follow Jim Cimino. So thanks. I'm Burke Mamlin. I figured this is the 30-year anniversary. It's a chance to kind of look backwards. So I figured I'd share my journey. First, I wanted to put myself into a LOINC term. Forgive me if I look a little analite, retentive doing that. Sorry, I have to ham it up with puns. So I started back in the 1970s when I was a kid, and my dad brought home a terminal that had acoustic couplers, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And it was part of a Regenstrief, one of the early Regenstrief studies, and I managed to take down the entire Regenstrief system playing with it. And thankfully, Clem, who was leading Regenstrief at the time, chose not to ban me from the computer, but rather gave me full access, gave me his password. And so there was no HIPAA back then. So I had full access, but I just wrote little basic programs. I got my Apple II. He saw me then as I started to get, my parents had to bring the computer down to the family room so they could see me once in a while. I loved programming, and Clem saw that and saw me as cheap labor, and I helped him with the medical gopher. And then Stan mentioned that building that I always still think of, Regenstrief, that I got sucked into that, worked full time as a programmer, got distracted, did this medical school thing to kind of expand my world, and got lucky enough to join an incredible group of fellows here. And under Clem's tutelage, we got involved with a program that IU has with the school in Kenya and helped build a system for them called the Ampath Medical Record System off of some of Bill's work and obviously Clem's guidance. And then had a little distraction of taking our Gopher system and reinventing it as G3 and getting it implemented in the hospital here. And that work in Kenya grew, and with colleagues like Paul Beyondich leading the way into a lot of global work, and has turned into a global health informatics effort within Regenstrief that I'm really proud of, and I think we feel has really grown out of the work that Clem has started. So I work clinically, and I work on a lot of different projects around global health. And so those are, OpenMRS has become an open source medical record system used around the world. OpenHIE is setting the standard for health exchanges. Open Concept Lab is a terminology, open source terminology service that's helping try to drive things like LOINC and make them more accessible to folks around the world. And then we have work with a data use community where we're really trying to help drive capacity building around the world. And throughout all that, we're touching and using LOINC for laboratory data, and anytime we're working with lab systems like OpenELIS or other even commercial lab systems and integrating with them. But LOINC terms are useful for forms. They help drive decision support. They help standardize and ease reporting analytics, the interoperability, the just even teaching people how to manage dictionaries and do that in a way that terms can be shared across systems. Not only using data, but reusing data. And you think of terminologies like LOINC, you think of, we're sharing, the semantics, or we're helping create these standard terms. But they're also teachers, just like HL7. They by sharing and building these standards and making them openly available, they become incredible tools to help teach people about how to use systems and how to kind of deal with that handshake lemma of the combinatorial explosion by leveraging standards. And its reputation. I mean, people recognize Regenstrief because of things like LOINC. As I was thinking about this, and I know I only have a couple minutes, but one thought came to mind, and it was, as a child, we came home from church one day, and my mom had decided, for whatever reason, I don't know what she was trying to make, but she decided she would put caramel in a pressure cooker. And we went to church, and we came back, and we found that pressure cooker had exploded. And so in our kitchen, the mystery was there really wasn't any caramel. It's like, where did it go? And as we looked around the kitchen, there were thousands upon thousands of these little, like, pinhead dots of caramel in every corner of that kitchen. I mean, we were finding those for 30 years. And the reason I bring it up is that when you think of how, it got to places that you didn't even think it could. It got inside cupboards. We were cleaning that forever. But I remember seeing all those little spots, and of course, I was the kid that had to clean it all up. But thinking of all that was there. Avogadro's constant comes to mind in terms of the number of dots, but it was everywhere. And that's when I think of LOINC, it's everywhere. It is all over the planet. And when we're working globally and we're working it doesn't matter where we go, whether it's the Seychelles or it's somewhere in a country in Africa or it's Asia, no matter who we're talking to, they know LOINC. And it's not just being aware of LOINC, they're using it, and there's no discussion. It is the standard. And so it saves us a whole bunch of time because we don't have to have the conversation of, well, what are we going to use for labs? Everybody's like, duh. And it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, people see it that way. So where to go, in the future of LOINC, continue setting the standard, being openly available, really showing the world what it's like to be a standard and how to do it right. Continue to do one thing and do it well. And that's I think, strategy is what you're not going to do. And I think thinking of LOINC not only about how to grow it and make it really continue to be the excellent standard it is, but try to avoid diluting, going too many directions, and do that one thing and do it well. And I can't help but take the opportunity, since I have a mic, to talk about the living concept. And my hope is that someday we get to a point where we evolve beyond thinking of concepts or these terms as a static thing. They're created locally, they go through a lifespan, they eventually make it into perhaps a reference terminology like LOINC. Sometimes they get retired, or things happen to a concept over time. And I hope for a day where we can enumerate those things, and the standards can also help us not only use the terminology, but also handle situations where something's retired, needs to be replaced, where it needs to be transformed, and that we start to define what those APIs need to be. So I'm a programmer, I think APIs. So anyway, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for not having to follow Jim Savino.
Thank you so much for that, Bert. Up next is Mark Roche. Oh, is he ready? I'm sorry. Okay, Mark. So Jim Semino's gonna go, is gonna go next, and then I'll call you. Yeah.
Okay, I've never clicked a share button in Teams, so let's see what happens. Are you seeing my slide, the mostly blank slide? I'm gonna guess yes. Not hearing anything.
We can hear you. We can see your slide.
Okay, good. I'm mostly blank and unanimated. Okay. So thank you for the indulgence, and thank you for inviting me here. Now I have to follow the story of the exploding caramel. That's the price I'll have to pay, I guess. So let me say a little bit about my sort of background and why I'm included, or I think I'm included in this panel. Then I'll talk about what LOINC is doing for me and the University of Alabama and the world, or what we're helping the world to do with LOINC. And then maybe a couple of suggestions, since I have everybody's attention, about things I'd like to see happen in LOINC. All right, let's see my slides. There we go. Okay, so I started at Columbia University in 1988, following a fellowship at Mass General, where I got to work on the beginnings of the Unified Medical Language System, and also took a course on knowledge representation at Harvard, and really opened my eyes to the idea of representing things in a way that wasn't necessarily what your program was going to use, but rather sort of the truth about the world that could then be used in all number of things. And I was looking at controlled terminologies through UMLS at the time. I wrote a paper in SCAMSI 1989 that looked at these different terminologies and did sort of a consumer report graph where a fully black circle was good and a half filled circle was kinda, and white was not there. And I looked at a variety of terminologies that were available at the time. And I started to come up with a list of things that I thought terminologies ought to have, like they ought to be complete, or the terms should be unambiguous, or there shouldn't be duplicates in the terminology, but there should be synonyms and that kind of thing. And while I was doing that, a couple of things happened. One was I was building the Medical Entities Dictionary at Columbia for their system, and I was using what I had learned at Harvard in knowledge representation and what I had learned by working with all these terminologies in UMLS to create something that was a little more robust and a little more complicated than, or let me say sophisticated, I hope, than the terminologies at the time. So I looked at things that had multiple hierarchies, and I also looked at things that had semantic non-hierarchical relationships. And so, for instance, glucose test had a code 1601, and it had some other information about it. But one of the things I did was I modeled what it measured. And I modeled the specimen, that it had a particular specimen. And then I modeled what was in the specimen using controlled terminologies. And that eventually led to the desiderata paper that was mentioned. And the key thing in the desiderata, which is really relevant to LOINC, is the idea of formal definitions. Desideratum number 6 out of 12. And the LOINC paper came out in 1996, and this is just a figure from there. And they had the fully specified name, but when you looked at it, you could say, gee, this is kind of a semantic model of lab tests. So there's this name, but then there's the component, it was called, and the thing that's measured by the test, and there was the system, which was kind of the specimen, and so on. All those things better than I do. And when I was building the Medical Entities Dictionary and saw LOINC, I said, oh, this is very similar, but if we're going to do LOINC, I have to add one thing. I had to model the units, whether it was a qualitative, quantitative test, and I had to add the time aspect. That is the property and the time aspect. And so I added that to my model. So, and I was able to make a more robust med as a result of that. Because I started with a semantic model, it made it really easy to do. So it was kind of a win-win. And so then I started working on, I moved to NIH, and I took that model with me and built the Research Entities Dictionary that powers BTRIS, the Biomedical Translational Research Information System at NIH. And then I moved to UAB and established the UAB Foundation on Ontology, which we call the UFO, because Birmingham Entities Dictionary had a bad acronym. And so we have the UFO, which is a good acronym because people don't really believe it exists. And sometimes they get a glimpse of it and they don't know what it is. But the idea in the UFO is to take the terminologies of I2B2 and reorganize them into more consumer-friendly things. So for instance, we can gather all the respiratory infections into a class called respiratory infection. So you can say, find me all the patients with respiratory infection, and you can get them all. Okay, so that's my sort of terminology / ontology journey. And LOINC today, in addition to assisting with the classification of terms and the multiple classification of terms, one of the things that we do at UAB is we share data. So we were one of the first 4 contributors to the N3C. And we contributed to we were part of all of us, and we're part of a number of other consortia. These are just some statistics on what we're submitting. And the reason I put these here is that we were able to pivot very quickly to be contributors to these different consortia, in large part, and well, for the laboratory terminology, certainly because of LOINC. And so LOINC allowed us to go to say, you know, we're going to do this. And a week later, we were contributing data to N3C, and that was in part due to LOINC. Other standards as well, like RX norm and of course ICD, but LOINC was a big part of that. Okay, so what do we want to do with LOINC? I think that you may want to consider a formal semantic model, and I guess you do, but you know, think a little bit, maybe a deeper model, and model some of the component things that are part of the model. So, for instance, modeling specimens. The idea that there's a specimen is more than just a body part, right? It's also got some kind of, you know, if you think of blood specimens, it's in a kind of a tube that has an anticoagulant or not, it doesn't have an anticoagulant, and so on. And then, you know, and look at unloading some of your overloaded parameters like component. I think, you know, you cram a lot of stuff into component, like challenge and things like that. And maybe think about a version of LOINC where you break that out into a separate aspect of the test. And then look at modeling the parameter terminologies to standard terminologies if you haven't done that already. So for instance, the chemicals that are measured, don't try to keep track of the chemicals, you know, map them to a chemical terminology. Same thing with system, to the extent that that's possible. And then the other thing is I'll throw the word reify, which just sort of means make real, something that's sort of virtual. So reify the concept classes. So Clem talks about there being a hierarchy in LOINC, and you can really make a hierarchy by taking any of the fully specified names and removing something from it. And now it becomes a more generic version of everything that has the thing filled in, right? But there's no code for that. At least Marjorie told me the other day that there's no code for that. I think we need codes for that because people need to be able to take their concepts that don't map exactly to a LOINC code and map them into a hierarchical code, so that then when I say, when eMERGE says, get us all these lab tests, and we have a bunch that don't have LOINC codes, for whatever reason, we felt the LOINC code didn't provide enough granularity. Now we can provide a class concept code that takes that place rather than map it into something that isn't exactly right. So those are my 2 recommendations. Happy to elaborate on those if there's Q&A. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. Next, we're going to hear from Mark Roche. We have a reminder of speakers. We have around 3 to 5 minutes. So 3 minutes or less. No, 3 to 5. This one.
Standing the wrong way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I called you. And your slides are here.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mark Roche. I'm a physician informaticist. And just see how we can advance the slides. I graduated from Medical University in Vienna. I've done a master's in medical informatics from Northwest University in Chicago. I did a bioinformatics fellowship at NCI, which I'm going to address a little bit further later. And I'm also a former adjunct professor at Northwest University, master's in interoperability course. Currently, I work as a medical director at Merck KGaA, the pharmaceutical company with headquarters in Darmstadt, Germany. and I'm also executive director at Syntropy. Syntropy is a joint venture, 50-50% by Merck and Palantir. Palantir provides the software foundry, and we provide the clinical and clinical research know-how. LOINC has shaped pretty much the entire my professional background. It started first at National Cancer Institute. I was working on clinical trials management system under the leadership of Dr. Kenneth Butov. This was Cancer Bioinformatics Grid Project, CA-BIG. I was one of the context administrators for CADSR, Cancer Data Standards Repository. And I remember I contacted Regenstrief, and they sent me a CD, a version, I believe, 2.10 of LOINC. I looked at it and I said, okay, this is a whole bunch of codes. What do I do with it? And I soon found out what I was about to do with it on my next project, which was OLIS. I'm going to go into it a little bit more into detail. I also worked at Canada Health Infoway. This was about 15 years ago, overseeing the implementation of about 250 digitalization projects across entire Canada. A core portion of this was Pan-Canadian Laboratory Observation Codes, which are based on LOINC. I then worked at Intelligent Medical Objects, developing proprietary clinical or physician-friendly clinical terminology that is in the backend mapped to all the appropriate standards, LOINC, SNOMED-CT, RxSNOMED, et cetera. For about 5 years, I worked at Office of National Coordinator at HHS, developing 2015 e-certification criteria, developing ECQMs for CMS, developing what we used to call a common clinical data set or meaningful use stage 2 data set. Now it's called USCDI, participating in the development of consolidated CDA, and worked with CDC to develop CCD cancer reporting standard with the HL7. All of these activities are heavily based on semantic and syntactic standards, including LOINC. I worked also at SAMHSA, trying to help them automate the extraction of the substance and mental health disorder related data from the emergency room departments, so that the CDC can get the data faster, so that the SAMHSA can get the data faster, so that we know what's happening in the field in terms of substance abuse disorder, not 2 or 3 years after the fact, but that data is more actionable in real time. And with CMS, I was the first Chief Health Informatics Officer at CMS, working on interoperability rule that was announced in 2020 and had heavy semantic and syntactic interoperability components. Currently, at Syntropy, we use LOINC basically for data aggregation, semantic mapping, converting unstructured data into structured data, data harmonization, data quality, and integrity check. It sits literally at the core of how we think about data and data management. Just an example, we received a data set from one of the data brokers. A data broker is a data aggregator that they aggregate the claims data, the clinical data, and then they resell that data de-identified to pharmaceutical industry for clinical research. We procured one such about 2 million records of those data. And it came in several different tables. One of the tables was lab results. I looked at the table, organized the table according to the column lab name, and sure enough, I saw the variations: CBC, complete blood count, comp BLD count, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the rows had LOINC codes, some of them didn't. So the first activity that we had to do was map everything to LOINC, so that we can retrieve the fully specified name, so that I can also get the classes and organize the labs in that table based on chemistry, urinalysis, et cetera, so that we can develop certain views on that data to verify the integrity, the accuracy, the level of completeness, and the level of representativeness of that data. So again, LOINC is very important in terms of how we think about the data and data processing. So Ontario Laboratory Information System, this is where basically, this is actually my first real life implementation of a semantic standard in clinical and laboratory medicine. All this was a initiative in Ontario that was a result of a pandemic, of a SARS pandemic, 2002 through 2004, which unveiled gross inefficiencies in how the data, laboratory data, was being produced by the labs, reported to the physician, reported to the public health unit, that then had to report that data to public health department. And then the public health department had the ultimate view on the scope of the outbreak and directionality of the spread of the virus. That process took about 4 to 6 weeks. So virus doesn't care about bureaucracy administration. Virus is, they promulgate a little bit faster. So the objective was to have one system to share lab info across stakeholders, private labs, they call them in Canada community labs, MDS, Gamma Dynacare, and CML Healthcare at that time, public health labs, public health units and divisions, Cancer Care Ontario, about 200 hospitals and 30,000 physician offices. The objective was also to avoid unnecessary duplicative tests. So in Canada, in Ontario, they have a nationalized healthcare system, which means that the government pays for all the services, which means that you need to budget properly for which services to pay, and you need to be conscious about how you spend your money. So you shouldn't be ordering HbA1c every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, but every 3 months, right? We wanted to also improve operational efficiency, data integrity and errors, improve patient care, access to and visualization of patient labs, support utilization management and guideline development. One such guideline development is in the United States, if you want to do a liver function panel, you do AST and ALT together. In Ontario, you do AST first, and only if AST is elevated do you reflex and actually order the ALT. And that's the way that the Ontario government saves on costs in their province. The users were all the users that were the initially envisioned. The process was simply to obtain lab compendiums from key largest stakeholders. We procured one from University of Health Network, a collection of hospitals in Toronto, all the 3 major private labs, public health labs, and then the referral labs as well, and then do a lot of mappings, but for each of the client. We submitted in that process a lot of new code requests to Regenstrief Institute because we were missing the codes with the SI units, with SCNC, like for glucose, total cholesterol. In Canada, they don't use milligrams per deciliter MCNC, so they use the property SCNC. So we submitted a lot of those codes. And we held a number of educational sessions and had to do a lot of policy changes in terms of regulatory changes in order to make sure that that we reduce the requirement for the manual sign-offs and faxing, and that the data can be pushed electronically. The outcomes were pretty much, aligned with the objectives, and they were satisfied. The key lessons where one of the key lessons is that the consistency of implementing standard is the key. The standard that is inconsistently implemented is not a standard per se. Good example is HL7 version 2, 15 years ago, everybody had it, nobody can talk to one another, right? So consistency of implementation is very important. So me and my colleague Beverly Knight, we made sure that the mapping is consistent and meaningful, not only for one client, but across the clients, right? The interoperability of teams is just as important as interoperability of technology. There is no technical solution for a human problem if people can't talk to one another, efficiently changing information. If they don't understand what the ultimate goal is, then you end up with inconsistent, incompatible solutions. Policy changes can take time. That's changing all the laws. Education is very essential, and lots of patience. I remember when I went to public health labs in Ontario, I asked for a digital version of all the codes. The lady pointed me to a room with a huge catalog on a table and started flipping through it and said, well, this is where we maintain all the codes. And I looked at that catalog and I thought to myself, this is going to be a long day. 30 seconds. All right, moving forward. LOINC is indispensable semantic standard that facilitates structured data capture, exchange, harmonization, and utilization and analytics. That was fast. Looking forward, workforce availability, education, training, and certification program. I think in addition to having a standard, we need to think about training people to consistently adopt that standard. Policymakers, educational policymakers is still lacking today. I'm working on a project in Europe where they have developed they're thinking of distributed, federated technical infrastructure for sharing the data. And one of the, and a bonus feature is the utilization of fire and semantic standards. And I'm like, no, that's not a bonus feature. That has to be the core feature. Otherwise, your project is dead on arrival. Clinical trials criteria, some of the inclusion exclusion criteria for clinical trials on clinicaltrials.gov are still manually encoded. And that adds another friction level when you want to import those criteria into an electronic health record and run them against the patient data. So these would ideally be structured in a in a more in a better way, in a coded way. Currently, that's not there in the human narrative, and I'm going to skip on the other parts. Thank you so much.
But
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Okay. Corey Smith? I think we're leaning towards the 3-minute presentation now.
Thank you all. I'll keep this brief. First of all, thank you, Marjorie, for the invite to be here. I'm honored to present today and with this esteemed group. My name is Corey Smith. I'm currently the Vice President of Informatics and Digital Products for the American Medical Association. My role in HIT is, I don't have any formal informatics training. I graduated from the University of Chicago with a master's degree in computer science and entered into a world that I didn't even know existed when I joined the team at the College of American Pathologists working to create this thing called SNOMED. I knew nothing. I was a lowly data engineer on the SNOMED CT design team when I first, very junior member of that team, where I first learned about terminology and data standards and met Marjorie as well. And learned about LOINC from another esteemed colleague, Kent Spackman, when he would talk about his LOINC SNOMED integration that he very carefully protected and worked on with his Perl scripts and created. So that's when I first learned about LOINC, but somehow I caught the terminology bug. I was inoculated somehow, and I don't know how that happens, but it did for me, and I'm grateful that it did. And so since that time, I've spent a lot of time in computable knowledge and enabling a learning healthcare system. The vision that you all, so many of you all, sort of embedded in my mind, and the Tim Berners-Lee article about the semantic web in 2001 just sort of inspired me. And so I've gone on to really focus on terminology development projects, data exchange standards development, implementation of those things, right? I like building standards, but I don't like building standards that don't get used. So focusing on implementation of these things, of standards around the world in a consultative role. And then I also have a software development and product management background, really focusing on tools to enable the development of standards and to enable the implementation of standards. I've worked with a lot of SNOMED areas. I won't read through all of these, but my current work, as I said, I'm the Vice President of Informatics and Digital Products at the American Medical Association, where we've been really working a lot on, helping the organization appreciate the value of open data standards and how we can really do more in together as part of communities that build open data standards. And I think we've been having a lot of success with that, specifically as it relates to the Gravity project. I've learned so much. I've spent most of my career in healthcare data standards, and as a founding member of the Gravity project, I sit on the steering committee, as well as have been the technical director. The AMA contributes my time and the AMA's time to do this work, learning about social care data integration, social care and healthcare integration, and advancing health equity by doing those things. Just to move on, I won't go through all of this, but over the years I've had the opportunity to do many implementation related projects using LOINC, from sort of bread and butter work around mapping local lab compendiums to LOINC, which Dan already used this, but LOINC is a verb. Fun fact, what are you doing? I'm LOINCing. So that's you all probably already know that. And then some other interesting work about using the LOINC ontology framework, document ontology framework, to improve the performance of NLP algorithms to codify unstructured data. Lastly, in terms of where I think we can go, and this is I think the gist of this is, we all have in this room the vision of all the things that terminologies can do and enable in interoperability and decision support and the vision, but the I find that implementation, there's such a gap between those terminologies and the things they enable from what happens in the real world. And so how might we start to climb up that value chain in terminology? And this is just one such example for LOINC that is worth thinking about, given that they've mapped or they've modeled all of the many panels related to assessing health-related social needs in LOINC. And one of the challenges we see is helping organizations convert that data to meaningful coded data, diagnosis codes, ICD-10, SNOMED, et cetera. And FHIR has a way to distribute computable knowledge in the form of these things called structure maps, which ultimately, if we have a consistent way to translate this data from social needs screening, we can reduce the burden of providers on manually interpreting screening responses, increase the analytics value of data across the country by having a consistent set of coded data, and decrease the implementation burden, or maybe said in the positive, make it easier to implement standards. So again, thank you all, Marjorie, for the opportunity to be here. Sorry to talk so fast, but I'm feeling we need to get through it. So thank you all, and happy anniversary, LOINC.
Thank you very much, Corey. Steve Emmerich. And then Victor Lee. Right after that.
Thank you, Marjorie, and thank you so much for inviting Charlie and Victor and myself to join in this great celebration today. We're very happy to be here to participate in what's just this incredible mind share and work that LOINC has accomplished since its inception. So, hi everyone, I'm Steve Emmerich from Clinical Architecture. I'm their VP of Strategic Client Success. And just a little bit about me. You'll notice that there's a picture of a parking lot with self-driving trucks on it. And I've never been a truck driver, but I think that there's part of me that always feels like I'm on this kind of road trip of learning new things every day. But why I've got that up there is because I was at a conference where it wasn't just health IT aficionados. There were some non-health IT, other industry players out there. And one of them was from the self-driving truck industry. And I thought about all of the things that are needed for self-driving trucks to function and everything that's kind of under the hood to make that go. And I think a lot about the work that's been done in health data standards with LOINC and with SNOMED going years back. And I think of that as what is under the hood in our health system to make it work. And if you don't have those pieces solved for and you haven't had those accounted for, those quality pieces, those interoperability pieces that certainly fit at the mission and the heart of clinical architecture, then things don't always go so well. And that truck might not work in the way that was intended to. So that's why I've got a picture of trucks in a parking lot. A little bit about me, maybe like Corey, I didn't, wake up and think I was going to end up in informatics as a career. I started out a long time ago as a molecular biology major, but I didn't really like being in a lab too much. So I ended up going into the US Army after I graduated, and that was really my crash course in computer science and signals intelligence. And I realized the collection of data off of some of these systems and how that's reported up to the brigade, and a general is trying to make decisions based on those data. That data quality is actually very important, and you need to really pay attention to what's under the hood there. So that was kind of a lesson in data quality for me that has, pretty serious impact. And then I didn't really know what to do after the Army. And I finally found a position at NLM that kind of combined this science and computer science background that I had learned. And I knew nothing about clinical terminologies, HL7, nothing at all. So, thank you, Betsy, so much for your guidance and your mentorship over the years. That kind of got the bug in me as to why this field is so important in the U.S. especially, and I'll get back to that in a minute. So I realized that there's kind of two types of realities. There's the terminologist reality and informatics reality, and then there's everywhere else that you go. And I feel like I've gone through my career kind of back and forth, and I don't know which is the real world anymore. So, you go out into industry, and when I was at USP, I realized that nobody really understood health data standards. And but their standards were very important. And so pushing them from physical world to integration into digital world for things like drug formularies, handling of hazardous drugs, even things like the USP dictionary that are used for nomenclature proof for drug manufacturers was very important. So I was at USP, I was at IMO also a little bit, working on some lab ontologies. And then before I came to clinical architecture, I was at Danaher, their Cepheid, which is their molecular diagnostics platform. So I'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll talk about some of the work that we're doing with LOINC at clinical architecture. So just quickly, this is an eye chart, but we learned at Cepheid this idea through some market research, this idea of a data value chain. From the moment that an encounter happens in a clinician's office, a lab is ordered, a lab is rendered. Those data are needed for clinical decision support for the individual, or maybe for deciding population health. Maybe those data are reused for reimbursement or for real world evidence. We were trying to figure out where can we do better? And what that led us to is our instruments are on the lab. We need to do a better job of blocking and tackling there. And there was a huge pain point for our customers, not only understanding how to order labs and which labs need to be ordered and interpretation of the test results, but just basic things of how do I interface this test into my LIS system? And everybody was doing it differently. And that was a big pain point for us. And so I called Marjorie and Isa as fast as I could. And I was like, we really need help here. So thank you, Marjorie and Isa, for your help. And that led to us sponsoring the LOINC conference, which I think was a nice outcome. And I hope that work continues. So now at clinical architecture, there's some really interesting things that we're doing with the Office of the National Coordinator. It's a relatively new collaboration. They actually have to produce a congressional report that was referenced in 2023 appropriations bill, where Congress wants to understand better the basics. How are we doing with lab data interoperability in this country? And so we're going to help them kind of do that data quality assessment. And when I say we, it's really Charlie. He's doing the heavy lift there. But it's an exciting opportunity, and I'm happy to talk more about it with any of you. As far as future directions, I think that what I saw at Cepheid and now, and I think that I've talked about this to many people, is that lab data just doesn't happen in the lab anymore. The whole care system is decentralizing, and people just don't go to hospitals anymore for care. You show up at ambulatory surgical centers or the pharmacy, and you get care at many different places. And that interoperability fabric and that glue that holds everything together and lets people make better decisions is more important than ever. Remote patient monitoring. So I see LOINC and data standards as more needed than ever in the future as the kind of fragmented care system, in a way becomes more fragmented. So yeah, that's my last slide. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Good morning. I'm seeing a recurring theme that there are many accidental informaticists in the room, and I'm certainly one of them. I had my start in my professional career as an internal medicine hospitalist, but I had this burning desire to participate in a variety of health IT initiatives. And I found myself eventually leaving clinical practice and becoming a full-time terminology geek. I get to run a team of terminology geeks, and we get to do a lot of LOINCing, as was referred to in a previous presentation. And I'm really happy to be here to be able to share one of the most rewarding experiences of my professional career, participating in a project related to electronic lab reporting. And so we'll actually just jump right in. We are working with a company called Datapult. They are a subsidiary of the Association of Public Health Labs. So we're supporting their initiatives to provide electronic lab reporting. They have public health labs as their clients. And what you see up here is, I mean, it's not important to read all the words, but there's a flow where messages from public health labs go to Datapult. They route them to our data quality solutions, where we take those messages and perform both a structural and a semantic normalization. So specifically, lab tests are mapped to LOINC, result interpretations and specimen types are mapped to SNOMED. There's some HL7 abnormal codes, things that are in line with the electronic lab reporting specifications. So once we have good data quality in those messages, we're able to interpret whether there are nationally notifiable diseases contained within those messages. So things like gonorrhea, chlamydia, HIV, you might have heard of SARS-CoV-2, things that are reportable across public health jurisdictions across the United States. So once we make those interpretations of the contents of those messages, we can find the ones that contain nationally notifiable diseases and send them back to Datapult, who then routes them to the respective public health authorities. So that's kind of, it's really rewarding because it kind of puts together a lot of the informatics principles that I've learned through the years under Charlie Harp's tutelage and through just participating and collaborating with industry experts. So just a couple of comments about how we're making this happen. When we're interpreting the contents of the message, we have a set of deterministic rules that are able to conform to jurisdiction-specific criteria. And we've modularized these rules because what we found is that across the public health jurisdictions, there are no two jurisdictions that have exactly the same set of reporting criteria. Certain conditions may be reportable in one jurisdiction and not another. And there's also an evolution of reporting criteria. So if we just take the SARS-CoV-2, early on in the pandemic, there were many jurisdictions that said, I want all results. I don't care if they're positive, negative, indeterminate, just give me everything. And then we saw an evolution to perhaps, well, I want SARS-CoV-2, but just the positive PCRs. And then now we have certain jurisdictions who say, I don't even want reporting for any SARS-CoV-2. So with this evolution, and it's been pretty rapid, we need to be able to turn on a dime and modify the rule sets for a particular jurisdiction, and kind of republish them and make them behave in conformance to evolving reportability criteria. We're also appreciative that there are processes in place where there are new emerging conditions. So if you remember Mpox, which was then known as monkeypox, those became available in LOINC as pre-release terms, and we were able to rapidly incorporate them into our deterministic rules to enable the reporting of Mpox. And then, of course, if we need to move even more quickly than that, APHL partners with LOINC to submit public health lab terms, the PLT codes, many of which may eventually end up in LOINC. But this enables the rapid transmission of codes that may not yet exist. So in conclusion, I think it's very clear that this is not possible without LOINC, and that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I'm just really excited to see where LOINC will go in the next 30 years. So happy anniversary. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mickey. And then Susan, last but not least, Susan Matney.
I'd like to thank all my opening acts. I'm the headliner. So just a little bit about me. I have been a registered nurse for over 30 years. I started at the bedside and I heard about this informatics program at the University of Utah that they were just starting, and I had created a database for my delivery log, and I thought, I think I kind of like computers, so I went into it. I applied in Intermountain Healthcare and was hired by this person named Stan Huff. And like the second day, this is LOINC and this is what you need to do, and this is SNOMED and this is what you need to do. And here is the terminology model and server that you're going to use. And I gradually gained a team of 11 and led that team. And so I've implemented terminologies at a lot of levels. I also became very involved in the standards. There was a nursing terminology summit in the late 90s and pulled together a lot of standards developers and talked to us about it. And I got an invite to that, and I'm sitting around the table going, oh my word, there's Virginia Saba. I mean, looking at all these people, and how come I'm here? And then I realized they had never implemented it. If you want to see Nad and Nick and Knock, here's my book. Here, you can have that. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. And Virginia says, Susan, what you're saying, you can't do that. Oh, yes, I can. I can do that. And so I took the LOINC to the American Nurses Association. They recognized terminologies for use by nursing. I became co-chair and started the Nursing LOINC Subcommittee. I did receive the Amy of Virginia Sabo Award and several awards I'm not going to read them all about. I don't have all my SNOMED stuff here, but I was also very involved in SNOMED. So I pulled together a bunch of nurses and we started to standardize nursing documentation. The Nursing Knowledge Big Data Initiative started 10 years ago, and we decided that we wanted to have shareable, comparable nursing data. We started with a framework and we pulled data from 3 institutions, 3 million units. They ran analytics against it to say what the nurses documented. And we started standardizing nursing care and putting all the assessments in LOINC. Some of the challenges: value sets. Where do you put them? How do you use them? How do you link them? How are they coded? Using LOINC and SNOMED. We're supposed to use LOINC as the question and SNOMED as the answer. Okay, how am I going to link those up and where is that going to happen? Knowledge models, information models, where are they? How do I know where my pain information model is, which I have standardized? I have a whole pain information model as a panel in LOINC, but how do I implement that? Do I put that in FHIR? And why do I want to do all this? Well, I want to do all this because LOINC facilitates the collection of data. All the secondary uses that we're going to use LOINC for, having executable software, all the things you guys have already sang, and I'm just singing the same chorus again for what you have. We want to improve patient care, and the only way we can do it is through the standardized terminologies. I'm super happy about the LOINC SNOMED collaboration, and I am involved in that and really glad. And if you want the future to work, the only way we can do it is implement it, and we've got to get our vendors involved in some way, and that probably needs to happen through public policy. And the headliner's short, so that's it for me.
Thank you to all of our panelists, for your thoughtful comments, and your work as adopters and implementers are representative of the fruits of our labor. I want to turn the floor over to Virginia Rio. We're going to call all of the panelists up front. We just have a short question and answer for each of you. And I promise we're going to move on to lunch very soon. So, thank you. Go ahead.
You have a question?
No, I'm saying for you, 2 to 3.
On this for the whole 20 minutes. Okay, so let me say that I bet everybody's smelling lunch in the room.
everybody's feeling like maybe it is lunchtime and we want to get back on schedule. And so I'm going to apologize to all of our speakers because I sat down with you this morning and said, this is what we're going to do with the panel. And we're now going to shift gears a little bit, but I hope you will not find that problematic. So what we're going to do is we've written a few questions down ourselves. And so we'll do a more traditional panel approach and just throw that question out and let you all speak to it. And then go through as many of these questions as we can. I will say one thing is I wrote these questions just now that there were two things that influenced me. And one was obviously your presentations, which contributed to these thoughts. But also, secondly, we've been working on an updated strategic plan for LOINC. And many of the things that you mentioned are also now, percolating up in our strategic plan. So these are questions that we are asking ourselves in many ways right now. And I just think we could benefit from your conversation on it. So the first question is, what do you see as the biggest changes in the next 5 years that will impact LOINC? Oh, no. If we get all blanks, I'll just go to the next question. Okay. What will be happening in healthcare or healthcare information technology or in the broader IT landscape over the next 5 years that we need to be thinking about in LOINC and be preparing for? Did that help, Clem? Yeah.
Can I weigh in?
Yeah, maybe we'll start getting some answers in that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, I forget whose hand went up first. Jim Semino, let's start there.
Okay, so the answer to the first question is always large language model and generative AI, whatever the question is. So as we think about things like how are we going to code data, how are we going to make use of patient data, it'll be interesting to see how large language models make use of coded data, because hopefully they can use it more accurately than they do free text data. So I think that's going to be something that we'll be looking towards. In terms of the next 5 years, 5 years from now, it seems like everybody's genome is going to be part of their medical record. It's getting so cheap to do it. Why wouldn't we? And so, LOINC is going to play a major role in that as well.
Thanks, Jim. I see Ed is also virtually wanting to comment on this, and then I'll go to the people in the room. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, a quick comment. In addition, I agree with Jim on the genetics, but I think social determinants of health are going to be extremely important. And I think work with LOINC and Gravity is really going to probably produce almost more codes than now exist in LOINC, simply because of social determinants of health.
Thanks, Ed. And now I saw lots of hands go up here. Does someone raise their hand? Do we want to just go down the line? Maybe I'll just, Clem, do you feel ready to comment on this, or you would like to?
Question whether AI will have some influence on this. That is, some have argued you don't need codes. You just take the text and work it. So I don't know the answer to that, but it'd be something to think about.
Stan? Yeah.
Well, I think we think about sometimes with the AI things, the analysis part of it and drawing conclusions and other things. And when I think about it and the importance of terminology, I say, well, okay, so you learn something. How are you going to transmit that knowledge to somebody else and they can use it in a computable form? And you can't sort of just transfer the neural network, in a sense, to the other system. You have to have names for things that participate in the rules and the models. And so I don't think we're going to be out of business anytime soon. I hope it can improve improve the quality of information that we use in large language models and in machine learning, et cetera. And I think that'll be dramatic. But I think even more important is that we'll have codes that then we can make a computable representation of the knowledge that's transmissible to other systems and becomes truly a foundation, a different kind of foundation of knowledge that we use within society in a different way than we ever thought about it before. And so you can transfer that knowledge as executable knowledge, as a program that they can immediately use. So you're not trying to teach people about it and then have them apply it. You apply it through a program. And I think that's what we enable in the things that we're doing.
Thank you, Stan. Jim, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I want to agree with Jim Semino that the answer to everything now is AI, and that the value of terminology standards is that they're curated knowledge, and that AI is only as good as the inputs, and that the value of structured terminologies and curated terminologies is the fact that they provide more veracity to the output that comes from generative AI. In terms of the scope, I think that what we're looking at now, especially with the impact of climate and the impact of migrations and things like that, that those impacts on health are going to be part of the health ecosystem as well, and that we might have to look at just even beyond social determinants, but the broader picture of health in general.
I agree with everything that's been said. And I just want to say that you can imagine better coded data helping to generate new knowledge and improving on AI of other types. But if we're going to apply what we are, I hope, learning more rapidly based on all of these good data to me or you, then our individual record has to have accurate coded data in it. And AI can't help, ought to help at least that none of the codes that get introduced to our thing are invalid and there's no internal contradictions in our records. We can do better. But the fact is, if I don't get the right thing entered that was actually done to me or the medication I'm on or whatever in my record, then all the AI in the world can't help me. So we have to keep worrying about that.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to run out of time. I was just asking ChatGPT how LOINC will change in the next 5 years, but
really? And did it have a good answer?
no, it's going on longer than I think we have time for. But when I think of where we're headed, I think of not only AI, but I think of being more patient facing and patient generated. And so when I think of where we need to be going or where I hope things are going to go over the next 5+ years is learning how to accommodate a more distributed system. And that probably also means being open to contributions more and more coming from the field, the Wikipedia model of leveraging the expertise, but also trying to distribute the contributions so that as people do more patient-centric and stuff at home, how can we bubble that up and get that standardized so that it can benefit as well? Maybe AI will solve everything, but I think of that, and then I also think that as a clinician, I don't need more data. I need summary of data, and so to the extent that LOINC can help contribute to summarizing what's available, standardizing and summarizing, I think that's what's going to be most helpful going forward.
So I thought of two things. One is the keyword in clinical research is real world evidence data. That's the keyword, meaning understanding not only what happens in the context of the clinical trial setting or in the clinical setting, but what happens with the patient outside of the clinical setting in their everyday life. So we have a whole bunch of new technology that captures what patients do on a day-to-day basis, and that significantly may impact the interpretation of clinical research. I'm talking about wearables, I'm talking about your sleep patterns, oxygenation, heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that LOINC is going to have to be pay close attention to all of these digitalization efforts in our everyday lives and make sure that the right data is captured the right way from the get-go so that we can use it in clinical research. The other point that I was thinking about is the machine learning. Heard a lot about, well, you can just feed machine learning data and somehow there is a magical fairy in the box that's going to make sense out of nonsense. That's not true. Machine learning is a dog that you need to train to sit, to bark. And so that dog needs to have a proper structure. Semantic standard
requires a particular structure, a grammar. It's a grammar that teaches machine learning how to properly express itself so that we don't end up with hallucinations, or I call them schizophrenic behaviors. Thank you.
Thank you. Two thoughts come to my mind as well. I would agree on the social determinants of health space. You know, if I think as I look into that world of social care, in my work at Gravity, that, you know, like Betsy mentioned in 1994, when there weren't standards for many things in healthcare. When I look at the social care world, I think they're, you know, from a data perspective, where healthcare was 30 years ago, and there's a lot of need there, and an opportunity. I think the bigger point that I would make for LOINC and any standard developer is, how can we make the value of what we build more accessible to more people? And by simplifying, right? Not necessarily simplifying our products, but how do we find a way to inject that value, you know, at the right moments, as in thinking more about users, and making it easier to adopt and use and to extract the value from the things we build.
Is this on? Yeah. So a couple things came to mind. I do feel like something we all intuitively know, garbage in, garbage out, and we say that, but then we see how some of these AI things have adopted and they're just taking a life of their own, and that there's something lost there. And maybe that's where we as a community really need to reach out and keep reminding the importance of data quality and how that can be leveraged in these AI things that are just more and more out there in the world being used right now, and people don't even know what's under the hood. And then going back to what we talked about earlier with decentralization, and there's just more and more inputs of data that are coming into the health ecosystem right now. And the better structure and semantics we can provide to those that go into that giant decision support apparatus that we need, the better. And I think LOINC has a huge role there.
So from where I sit as an implementer of standards-based technologies, as I look into the next 5 years, what's obvious to me, or what I think hopefully will be obvious to many people, is that we'll see less talk and more action. Earlier in my career, we used to talk a lot about, well, if we could only have interoperable exchange of X or Y or Z, then, you know, life would be so much better. And I think we're starting to see a lot of implementations. I think I've personally witnessed the maturation of standards, and I think that in turn feeds more mature implementations. We're seeing more adoption of technology solutions that rely on interoperability. So that's where I think we're going in the next 5 years.
What I'd like to see LOINC do is improve their education. We have a lot of people that are out there trying to implement, they're trying to map, and they don't understand what they're doing, and there's really not good tools to help them to map. I mean, SNOMED has developed an excellent education program that is online and able for others. As I go out and try to educate nurses, you know, that are implementing systems and how to map to LOINC, even just the axes and how it is structured is foreign to them. And so you start seeing a whole lot of differences in what they map to, and they don't have an understanding of that. So if we need to be shareable and comparable, they need to be consistent within their EHRs, and we need to teach them how to do that.
Thank you all. We've got about 10 more minutes, so I think we can do some more questions. Marjorie, was there a question you wanted to pose?
Oh, sorry. You already asked my question.
Yeah. I what I heard from all these responses just is like this expansion, right? That there's going to be more types of data, you know, more sources of data, more, you know, so also the request to LOINC and the drive to get LOINC's work done is only going to increase over the next 5 years in some incredible ways, right? And the second, and Susan started to touch on this, I think, is that we can develop standards, we can develop the perfect standards until the cows come home, but if we don't implement them properly, many things will go wrong. And we still have not achieved that level of precision in our implementation of standards that really is critical to success. And maybe I've missed all your points, but that is what I heard. So the question and Susan, you started to answer it already, is, what would be the top 2 things that we could do that would better support implementers? Education being a really good one, but beyond education, are there other things that we can support implementers with that would improve the quality of the implementation and the consistent use of the standard? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Corey.
maybe this gets back to the simplification piece and making the value more accessible. So maybe it's more about API-based delivery, less about sort of delivering a code system and more about delivering computable, programs, as Stan has been talking about, ways to climb up the knowledge value chain and deliver via APIs, the thought.
Thanks, Corey. Ed, what did you want to add?
Well, I want to say that, first of all, HL7 now has essentially become 2 divisions. First of which is continuing to make the standards, but probably the more important division now is the implementation division that's working on some of the things that that you're talking about in terms of education. The other thing I would say is that I am an engineer, but I've spent my entire career in the medical world, and what I've learned is we really need teams. It's not a doctor talking to an informaticist. It is a doctor and an informaticist working together on a single problem. And we have to engage the broader community than just the people making the standards. And they have to understand the value of it and help us understand. The comment was made, I don't need more data. I need summary data. I thought was an interesting comment. In a direction in which we really need to move. So I think there's a lot of learning yet to be done, but it's putting the groups together that I think is extremely important.
Thanks, Ed. Oh, Susan, what?
Clem's first.
Oh, Clem.
Clem,
Did you have a comment? Yeah. You go ahead.
Yeah, well, the question is, I think there's 2 kinds of observations or variables. One of them is like, it's mechanical, it's out of a lab instrument, an EKG machine, it's something measured. And the other ones are these more ethereal or fuzzballs under the bed sort of things that people invent. And I think those are going to be trickier to kind of snag and systematize than the ones that come out of machines or some kind.
I think one of the things we need is structure. I mean, we have a lot of semantics, but the syntax and how we're going to informate with the information models and how to use that and be consistent at a high level. For labs, we're going to use these in this, and FHIR is really helping with that. It is slow to adopt. It's hard to get things out there fast with FHIR, like pain assessment. It's a project, but is it ever going to be out there? But having structure and know where these things fit beyond the EHRs is something that is really needed.
Other comments on that, on the implementation challenges?
Yeah, and so for those of us that are standards nerds, this is all crystal clear about what needs to be done. But I think we have to face the reality that the day-to-day clinician doesn't really care much about this. And that what we really need are tools to facilitate the implementation of standards in a way that makes it transparent that there's standards in the background to the clinician. And that's something that has to be addressed, I think, at the HR level, as opposed to, us trying to develop new tools to implement standards. The standards are there, they can be used, but they're difficult to implement consistently. And they're even more difficult to get the data recorded because there's no way that we're going to get all the clinicians out there to understand the intricacies and the subtleties of standardized terminology. So I think really what we need to work on more in the implementation space is how do we make these standards transparent to the day-to-day working clinician?
Dan, were you?
I'd just like to point out, I asked ChatGPT what the 2 most important things LOINC could do, and it recommended documentation and training and developing tools for management and use. So.
Thank you. That is very interesting.
Yeah, we love it.
Stan, did you have a comment? Yeah.
Well, I have a comment. It's a little bit, it's a divergence in a sense, but I feel so strongly about it. I just want to say, here we are at 30 years and I can say, with we worked on LOINC for probably 10 years before a bigger group than 30 people knew what we were doing. It's taken, and LOINC became pretty much universal, probably around 2010 or something for laboratory data, still not used in other things. My point is we're in a marathon. We're not in a sprint. And in that, it's so important that we inspire other people who are going to carry on this work when I retire or, whatever happens. It is really, it's of incredible value. And somehow we need to inspire people like all of the people who are here to invest, to be interested, to take an interest in this in their lives, and contribute to this effort. Now, it's a select group of people that probably have a certain genetic defect that want to do this kind of stuff. Closely related to library science in a way, I think, Betsy. But so, boy, let's bring in everybody who's interested in this. Let's inspire them. Let's help them finish this relay marathon that we're in, to really realize this value.
I'm recalling that in 1994, many of us first heard about LOINC in an auditorium at the National Library of Medicine. Stan was presenting what LOINC was in 1994 to a group of people where we were trying to come to a conclusion of, okay, what were the N number of terminologies that were going to be part of a large-scale test to actually determine how much of the stuff that people were using in real systems was actually already conceptually in existing standards. That is, did we have a whole lot of new terminology development, or did we already have that? So we had to, move on from that point. It was this issue of, could we select 3 or 4 and say that's the base and move on because they were good enough? And so LOINC, Stan first told us all about LOINC in that meeting, and we were getting started, and Sue Bakken and Keith Campbell were at the front, and I was too, as we were getting organized for the meeting. And Sue looked out in the room and said, I have never seen so many vocabulary nerds in one room in my life. But all of the people that were there have inspired a certain number. Now, when you look around here and you hear the stories of people who were mentored by Clem, or they were mentored by Stan or whatever, and so the next cohort has to do the same thing. But that needs to happen at scale too. I agree with Stan.
I think unfortunately, I wish we had lots more time. And if we do another event, we're going to have to think about how to better get this wonderful dialogue and give it more time than we were able to.
Can we ask one quick question to Clem and
Oh,
Stan?
yes, please. Yeah.
I just want to know, back in 1994, when you were coming up with this stuff, is this what you pictured? This is 30 years later. Are we, is this what you thought?
It was obvious. I don't think I remember that back then. Yeah, but actually, it was just you had to have, like Stan, you got to have some names for these things so you can manipulate them in computers. And of course, they're not names or codes with names. So I think was the genesis of it.
And I always recall Clem at the beginning saying, this stuff, they're already reporting it in machine readable form. We doesn't have to convert it. They've already done that. But if they would only just name it the same thing so we knew what it was, this is an obvious place to start because it's already in machine readable form. It's just in machine readable form that isn't very useful when you want to aggregate or reason across it.
Stan, the question was also directed to you. Yeah.
I had no clue.
Well, what a great place to end. I had no clue. Maybe we will say that the next time we gather and look backwards. I want to say anybody who is either online or in the room who wants to make a comment to us or contribute in any way, those online, maybe through Teams or, do you want to give an email address where we could just take any? What was it?
LOINC@LOINC.org.
Yes, LOINC@LOINC.org. Drop us a message, it might inspire us to do some more convenings because I feel like this was a very rich day for us. Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to very shortly, but we have a few messages, well wishes from some of our collaborators, Keith Campbell, whose name came up today, and others.
30 years of LOINC. Congratulations to all of you. I look forward to continuing to work with LOINC in a spirit of continuous improvement and collaboration, exchange in open dialogues, share our insights, and work collaboratively to refine and adapt standards like LOINC to meet the evolving needs of our industry. So here's to you and all of your community contributors. Thank you for your dedication and hard work. Here's to many more years of success.
Hi, I'm Jessica Cronin. I'm a nurse and I'm an informaticist. I have the opportunity to serve as the LOINC Nursing Committee co-chair. First, I want to say happy 30th anniversary, LOINC. Secondly, our group is made up of nurses from across the country who dedicate their time for advancing the use of LOINC to enable interoperability, data usability, and evidence-based practice. So come along with us, and happy anniversary, LOINC.
Hi, this is Bob Nist, the interim CIO for Regenstrief. And I just wanted to pass along my congratulations to the Health Data Standards team for the 30th anniversary of the LOINC standard. I've only been at Regenstrief here for a short time, but I've already seen the enduring impact of this standard. In the data services team, we certainly benefit from this standard, whether it's bringing in data and manipulating it from the INPC, whether it's the standardized OMOP registries that we try to create, or software projects that we may be working on with other teams such as CBMI. So once again, congratulations to the team and kudos for such a good, strong standard and enduring piece of work. Thanks.
Happy birthday, LOINC. In comparison to some of my colleagues, I'm a relative newcomer to understanding the beauty and depth that LOINC provides. Yet, I've always been a true believer and a user. LOINC has always filled a critical niche well, in fact, multiple niches in healthcare terminology standards. The openness and willingness to create what was needed at the time and was requested is something all could have done. One of the exciting things that I was able to accomplish over the past few years was to understand the depth of knowledge behind LOINC, particularly LOINC parts and groups, and that I could use those to create value sets and to link to other code systems. In addition, my past few years as a document ontology chairman, I've gotten to learn from and work with some incredible Regenstrief people that make up the world. So happy birthday from Belize. May there be many more.
Hi, I'm Susan Hickman. I'm the director of the IU Center for Aging Research at Regenstrief Institute. Congratulations to LOINC on 30 years of progress and innovation in interoperability and health data standards. LOINC codes serve as the hidden foundation for much of the research we do both here at the Institute and across the world. Kudos to the team for this innovative and impactful work, and best wishes for another 30 years of progress in health data standards and interoperability.
Happy birthday, LOINC team. We start seeing Clem MacDonald and Stan Huff efforts for widespread adoption of LOINC realizing. This is great to improve patient care, patient data management, as well as the future use of real-world data and evidences. I am Xavier Gansel, lab data interoperability leader working for bioMérieux, a French in vitro diagnostic system manufacturer and world leader in clinical microbiology. Starting in 2015 and 16, with the very early days of the future FDA Shield initiative, IVD manufacturers got involved in supporting LOINC adoption and implementation. This translated in the ERA-IVD specification, the IHE lab automation workflow messaging, also known as IHE law, its translation to CLS IOTO 16 and lastly CLS IOTO 17. Those are made available in their system by several IVD manufacturers. This is the case for bioMérieux, where more than 90% of our product portfolio is offered LOINC encoded. From a bioMérieux perspective, we see several hundreds of LIVD downloads yearly worldwide, as well as LOINC customer support requests from North America, European Union, and Middle East countries, and last but not least, IHE law requests. Those did not exist some years ago. The trend is here, but it needs to be encouraged and supported by health authorities to grow quicker and higher. This would not have been possible without the LOINC commitments. Once again, happy birthday, LOINC.
Hi, this is Chuck Jaffe. On behalf of HL7, I'd like to congratulate LOINC on 3 decades of standards development excellence. Through our collaboration, we've been able to move even closer toward the desired mutual goal of true interoperability. Moreover, we look forward to the next decade as the progress toward that end continues. Thank you.
Congratulations, and thanks to everyone who's been so actively involved in this wonderful effort and community of LOINC for so many years. I am proud to acknowledge the many wonderful things that have been accomplished, including broad international uptake and the ability to stand with the other giants of the healthcare terminology landscape in facilitating effective healthcare information storage, retrieval, and communication across so many systems, domains, and subject areas. It's all possible because of all of you wonderful people involved and having such a great organization to support and encourage the efforts. I look forward to many more years of brilliant and creative advancement of LOINC and working with all of you to help make this happen.
Hi, I'm Joyce Hertko, the Chief Operating Officer at Regenstrief Institute. Today, I would like to recognize LOINC on this auspicious anniversary. To LOINC's founders, the hundreds of passionate volunteers over the past 30 years, and to the current team led by Dr. Marjorie Rollins, I joyfully celebrate each of you and the important work you do every day to provide universal codes and the names that provide a common language for identifying health measurements, observations, and documents for interoperable data exchange. Here's wishing you and LOINC continued success for many years to come. Cheers.
LOINC, LOINC, LOINC.
Hello, my name is Shelley Lapon, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Snowman International. On behalf of Snowman International, our management board, and our General Assembly, we would like to congratulate the LOINC team on their 30th anniversary. Over the past 3 decades, the LOINC standard has played a pivotal role in the global standards ecosystem. Regenstrief and the LOINC team have been a vital partner of Snowman International, beginning with the development of a linkage table and now the work the 2 teams are doing in regards to the development of the LOINC extension. The latest project, which has gone out to the community for comment, promises to be an industry-leading interoperability solution. And the dedication of the LOINC team along with the Snowman International team has made this all possible. The communities of both Snowman International and LOINC are very excited to implement this groundbreaking solution, which will allow for the ease of use with both standards in their health systems. So again, Snowman International would like to congratulate LOINC on its 30th anniversary, and we hope you enjoy the celebration.
Hi everyone, and congratulations LOINC on your 30th birthday. It won't surprise any of you that when I say that I'm an old man who got involved in biomedical informatics and electronic health records long before LOINC existed. The Regenstrief Medical Record System had its own proprietary database, And one of my fellowship duties under CLEM was to link more than 20,000 diagnosis terms to ICD-9. I got a real schooling in how much of a mess different coding systems were. Clem and Dan and Marjorie have worked hard to reduce this tower of coding babble for observations to LOINC, which has become the standard across the globe. What an achievement. LOINC's 30 years are just a preamble to many more decades of global leadership in creating a common lingua franca for recording observations. It could not be in better hands.
Hi, folks. I'm Chris Shute. I'm Chief Research Information Officer at Johns Hopkins, and it's my enormous pleasure to make these commentaries for the celebration of LOINC. I've known about LOINC for an awful long time. I remember when HL7 was a system where the message you received, there was always a surprise inside. You didn't know what the payload was going to be, even for laboratory data. And of course, Clem fixed that. He came up with Lab LOINC originally, and the rest is history. Our capacity to have more ordered and structured information has been enormously enhanced with the contributions of Regenstrief and LOINC and the community around it. I'm pleased to say that I work closely with LOINC these days in Regenstrief. I know David Barato and others have shown me the inner sanctum of named parts and structured content and linked information. LOINC seems simple on the surface, but actually there's a tremendous amount of sophistication under the hood. And for that, we are all grateful. But I want to be brief. My kudos to the many years of LOINC's existence and its celebration, and may it continue in a way that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Today, we happily celebrate 30 years of achievement in LOINC. LOINC, like any major broadly adopted healthcare terminology, has had an outsized impact on not just the process of healthcare, but also the economics. I remember that when I was working at HC1.com, a local laboratory company, our technical staff were always very happy when laboratory results data came in as LOINC. They breathed a big sigh of relief because it made everything so much easier. LOINC has developed significantly in the last few years, from adding genetic testing information to COVID to social determinants of health, and I expect that evolution to continue. Today, I would like to put out a particular challenge for LOINC and its collaborators. We need to integrate information about climate change in all major biomedical vocabularies, including LOINC. In order to understand the effects on health of climate change, we need to be able to measure and analyze it, and LOINC will have to be part of that. So with that, here is some homework for the next 30 years. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brian Dixon, and I am the Interim Director of the Center for Biomedical Informatics at the Regenstrief Institute. I'm sorry that I can't be with you all, but I wanted to wish you a very hearty congratulations on 30 years. LOINC means a lot to me. The LOINC team gave me my start as a computer scientist and also started my career as a researcher in studying how LOINC was being used in public health. Today, LOINC remains critical to the work that we're doing in public health. Everything from supporting electronic laboratory reporting to biosurveillance to monitoring the health of populations for those with chronic diseases. So I am personally grateful to LOINC, and everywhere I go when I talk about LOINC, people are so appreciative of the work that all of you do, the team, the committee, the working groups, all of it. So thank you and keep up the good work. Congratulations on 30 years, and here's to the next 30.
Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Cullen. I'm a family medicine doc. I had the privilege of working at Regenstrief for a few years, where during that time, for a few months, I was the acting co-director of LOINC. I want to give a big shout out to LOINC for 30 years of amazing work that has been transformative, and it has had an impact on everything we do. I work in public health right now. Every day we rely on the standards that LOINC has produced. These standards help ensure that the data that we have and that we utilize can be linked to standards that can be aggregated. Based on that aggregation, we're able to understand what's happening in the community. That information and knowledge helps guide our decision making and helps us develop implementations that will make a difference. I also had the privilege of asking LOINC to help me develop the codes for adverse childhood experiences. This is now about 8 years ago. It felt like a huge advance. And that information, those codes, were then used to allow us to look at long-term evaluation of the impact of adverse childhood events and experiences. That's been transformative for the work that I do, but also for the work that we do throughout the globe. So I just want to give a big shout out. Thanks for everybody that helped make this happen. And here's looking to another great 30 years for LOINC.
Hello, I'm Craig Brader, and I have the privilege to serve as the chair of the board for the Institute. And of course, I've been involved with the Institute for a number of years in my prior roles at Indiana University. This has afforded me the opportunity to see LOINC in action, and it is incredible. I'm sorry I cannot be at this 30-year celebration, but it really marks 3 decades of incredible accomplishments. And I think it's important that we take an opportunity like this to take a step back and really take a good hard look at the stupendous impact that LOINC has had over the years. It is truly marvelous and little appreciated outside those who are in the standards space. So LOINC is truly an unsung hero in the world's approach to medical care. It's had impact both locally and nationally and around the world that is truly immeasurable, and we should all be proud. I want to thank all the people who've been in LOINC since its beginning for all these accomplishments. I regret that I can't be there in person, but really celebrate and have fun, and I'll be thinking of you. Thank you.
In 1998, Clem published a paper in the Journal of American Medical Association called Canopy Computing Using the Web in Clinical Practice, which nobody was doing back in 1998. And the abstract begins, and this is typical prosaic Clem way of thinking. The rainforest canopy is a seamless web through which arboreal creatures efficiently move and reach the edible fruits without any attention to the individual trees. Individual health computer systems are rich with patient data, but rather than a canopy linking all the trees in the forest, the data fruit come from a diverse forest of individual computer trees, laboratory systems, word processing systems, pharmacy systems, and the like. These different sources of patient information are difficult or impossible to reach by individual physicians, especially from their offices. 25 years later, we're about ready to realize the fact that the information can follow patients wherever they go. But for that to happen, these systems have to talk to each other. And they have to talk to each other. If not, then what we end up with is a Tower of Babel of information that actually we end up drowning in data and starving for information. That's only possible if these systems can be linked in a way that makes clinical sense. And in the end, what LOINC is a clinical system. And the people who develop it are clinicians. They're caring for patients, because without that, the clinicians can't have the right data at the right time, in the right place, on the right patients, in the right format to make the best decisions. So the 5 rights of information, it doesn't happen if they're not all able to link together in a common set of concepts. But they're really based in clinical medicine. And it's interesting that many people start out in clinical medicine, end up doing this, say, well, I left clinical medicine. You never left clinical medicine. This is clinical medicine. This is the way that we care for our patients. So 30 years, I want to thank, Clem and Stan and Dan and Marjorie and the really tens of thousands of people around the globe who've made LOINC what it is today. But it's, as Burke said, it's a living thing. It has to evolve. The next 30 years is going to look very different than it does today, and it'll serve it'll serve the same purposes, but more purposes, whether it's veterinary medicine or social care or climate care. That you can only do that if you got the right information at the right time in the right way. So I want to thank them, and I also want to thank the Regenstrief Institute, the Regenstrief Foundation, the National Library of Medicine for the financial and organizational support they provided LOINC, without which it wouldn't have happened. It would have been just an uphill climb, but they made it so that the people who were doing these cognitive things didn't have to worry about all the logistic stuff. Well, yeah, they had to worry about it, but it got done. And without that continued support of this combination of people and organizations, it wouldn't happen. So here's to LOINC, 30 years, the first 30 of many more 30-year decade, 3 decades of work. And congratulations to everybody who's been a part of it.
So thank you very much for that eloquent toast. And this concludes our program. This has been, an amazing day. It's hard to imagine that we've come 30 years and made all of the progress that we've made. So I want to thank everyone for coming and spending the time here with us and sharing in the celebration with us. And of course, I want to thank the amazing Health Data Standards team, and I have to call them by name. David Biorto, Ross Marietta, Tim Briscoe, Isa Hafiza, April Lackey, Elizabeth Lumakovska, Cindy Lumberg, Felicia Owens, Jennifer Pianki, Virginia Rio, Jeffrey Rotimo, Stephen Wagers, and some veterans who are here today, Jamie Deckard and John Hook. We couldn't do this without you as well. So thank you everyone for an amazing day. It is time for lunch, fellowship, and networking. Thank you for coming.